On the other hand, if we pull back a little and consider larger currents of human existence, there does seem to have been ample reason for anxiety. The climate, as I say, often dramatically changed in those epochs. There were long droughts and at some point the almost total dying off of reindeer, which had been humans' primary food, with what precise consequences we probably will never know, beyond that humans somehow adapted and survived, and some, of course, retreated with the reindeers to the poles, to the North Pole. And we also can't possibly know whether any single person or group of generations would have been aware and especially daunted by these grim developments. Perhaps one year winter came earlier, perhaps another year the reindeer migrations arrived later, and not at all. Would there have been a history to contain these matters? We don't know that either, but if there was, what would have been the emphasis of those who recorded it? Would they have been depressives, manic depressives, optimists, pessimists? A little side note. My 4-year-old grandson, who's often daunted by his 2 older brothers and put upon by and hearing the word optimist somehow come up, proclaimed to his parents, "Brothers aren't optimists, they're just plain brothers." I'll continue to be more personal here. Like many people I know, like many of you, as we've expressed it over these days, I have a somewhat, a wholly frightening vision of the future of humanity and of our Earth. There are periods when I live in a state of acute anxiety, indeed almost panic, about the future that awaits the Earth and our children and grandchildren. Last summer, I realized one day that every poem I was writing or attempting to write had global warming either as its overt or implied theme. Sometimes I'm depressed beyond writing or saying anything at all. I fall into a funk that threatens sometimes never to end. Given all the evidence that's been accumulated about global warming, this seems to be a perfectly reasonable response to the only future we have in sight. On the other hand, I've had to realize over the course of my life that I'm intrinsically somewhat of a depressive person about much else besides the end of the world, and that my instinctive response to fear or despair or danger is to plunge deeper into the darkness which so readily takes me. It took me a long time for me to notice that many people respond differently. Friends who, when deeply concerned about large matters, can turn easily from them into a relatively cheerful vision of the world and their lives, while I go on brooding and indeed trembling. And certainly not unsensible public figures can manage to convey a kind of bright vision that confounds personalities like mine. One of my favorite recent examples is Fred Kavli, a wealthy scientist philanthropist who recently established a program of $1 million prizes for scientists, and who announced at the first presentation ceremony, "The future is going to be more spectacular than we ever can imagine." I hope with all my heart that he knows something I don't. I've come to wonder lately, though, what the implication of all this is for my life and work as an artist, a poet, a writer. Certainly the traditions of literature, particularly in the last century and a half, has had its fair share of dark personalities, more than mere pessimists, sometimes outrageous nihilists. One of my most enduring poetic influences has been Baudelaire, hardly a paragon of healthy thought. Don't I have a right to express my own sadnesses? I have often enough, Lord knows, in the past, and I'm sure I will again, but at the same time, mightn't there be some responsibility to my artistic endeavors I hadn't suspected, hadn't conceived of until now? Surely the most extreme vision of the future in recent years is Cormac McCarthy's novel, The Road. McCarthy is a novelist of craft and has a powerful gift for verisimilitude. And in his book, he puts all his talents at the service of the literally darkest non-science fiction fate. that has ever been conceived for human beings. The earth, land, and sea is black with soot and ash, utterly silent except for the wind, some mysterious intermittent explosions, and the several words, most of them threats, human beings still manage to pass between them before, in many cases, they devour each other. Those of you who have read the book know that the word grim hardly begins to do justice to the sheer horror McCarthy inflicts on the planet and on us, his readers. I use the word inflict intentionally. I'm not the only person I know who's expressed regret at having ingested the book. I feel sometimes indignant that I have to have it in my consciousness. If there ever was a book that embodied the extremity of the emotion we call panic, this has to be it. I find it's like having a piercing scream in my mind, one which, when the book comes to mind, which it does more often than I'd like, goes off like a siren. I think of works by some participants in this conference, many of John Coetzee's books, particularly Waiting for the Barbarians or Gretel Ehrlich's The Future of Ice, very different books of premonition and prophecy, which despite the sorry possible fates both explore, I treasure. I'll admit when I first began reading Gretel's book, I thought I wouldn't be able to finish it. Her analysis and prognostications about the terrible future in store for the world seemed to consist of information I already, to my sadness, possessed. Reading it felt like watching an autopsy of a living body. As I went further into the book, though, I was taken with its wise, engrossing meditations and found it finally inspiring, precisely perhaps because it doesn't manifest the kind of annihilating cosmic and aesthetic panic McCarthy's book does. The Future of Ice has its own epigraph, its own enduring motto, "Beauty saves me." Until I went back to the book for the phrase to quote, I remembered it as "Beauty saves us," and I think I'll keep it like that. Beauty won't save the world from the depredations with which it's already been savaged, but it can save us from the enervating despair which is the outcome of panic, that paralysis which might keep us from doing what we can to confront what's before us. We'll never know how our ancestors, so put upon by the enormous unknown world in which they found themselves, persevered and survived, but we do know that they bequeathed to us and probably infiltrated into our genes the conviction that the dream and execution of the beautiful made the world theirs and ours in a way nothing else could, ours to cherish, ours to protect. Beauty saves us. Beauty will save us. The beauty of art, the beauty of spirit, and most fugitive of all, the beauty of hope.